Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Dov Diamond, and I'm a member of the Student Lecture Series Committee here at Cooper Union Erwin S. Hannon School of Architecture. As always, I'd like to thank Alicia Jaffe and Jeffrey Brown for their continued support of the Student Lecture Series. And tonight, we are extremely excited to be joined by Lyla June. Lyla June is an Indigenous musician, scholar, and community organizer of the Diné, Navajo. I'm not sure how to pronounce that next one.
Tsétsêhéstâhese.
And European lineages. Her dynamic, multi-genre presentation style has engaged audiences across the globe towards personal, collective, and ecological healing. She blends studies in human ecology at Stanford, graduate work in Indigenous Pedagogy, and the traditional worldview she grew up with to inform her music, perspectives, and solutions. She is currently a doctoral student working at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, studying the values, strategies, and characteristics of Indigenous food systems. Lyla June will share how the core of these systems, which is service, abundance, and reverence, could inform and influence our design strategies today. Contrary to popular belief, Indigenous peoples leveraged immense influence on the land and waters of North America. This was done with tact, compassion, and ingenuity. What can these systems teach us as designers of all types? Thank you, Lyla, for joining us. And before we hear from Lyla, I'm going to hand it over to Sage to give another short intro.
Hello, my name is Sage Addington, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Cooper Union's Native American Association. We are the very first Indigenous student focus group here at the Cooper Union, and we were founded this year in 2022. We are really thankful to be included in this space and to be given a platform to plug our student organization, follow us, Cooper Union NAA on Instagram, and to welcome the wonderful Lyla June. Thank you for helping decolonize and to indigenize this space, and we are really thankful for the knowledge that you are sharing with us today. I hope everyone understands how special this exchange is. So I just want to say, thank you on behalf of the Indigenous student body here at the Cooper Union.
Thank you. Honored to be here, excited to be here. And maybe before I start, I will just introduce myself in the traditional manner. I think it's really exciting to have a discussion between Indigenous thought and Eurocentric architectural thought, because I think the two could actually cross-pollinate quite wonderfully. The resources, the access, the power that the Eurocentric architecture community has could be very beneficial to Indigenous peoples. And the ingenuity, the science, and the strategies and the ethics that underpin Indigenous architecture could be really helpful to the Eurocentric architecture community. And I think when we work together in that way, we can really bring about some quite beautiful change. In botany, they talk about hybrid vigor, which is this idea that, two different subspecies hybridized become more resistant to disease, very hardy, very, sometimes they're the only species you don't have to vaccinate because they have a multitude of genetic information to draw from being hybrids. And so I think the same is true for cultural hybrids. When we hybridize certain things, they become stronger. And so my hope and my prayer with this talk is that we can bring about that hybridization of Indigenous, Eurocentric, and Asian American, African American, Pacific Islander, all these different ways that we think, bringing them together so that we can really crowdsource the innovation that each of our ancestors bring to the table. At the same time, given that where we are, we want to center the Indigenous peoples of wherever we are. And I'm not biased to Native people here. If I was in Australia, I would be centering Aboriginal peoples. If I was in Thailand, I'd be centering Gaziñón people. If I was in Japan, I'd be centering the Okinawa. So you know, wherever we are, we need to center the indigenous peoples of the land we're standing on, precisely because by definition, indigenous peoples know how to live in one place for thousands and thousands of years without destroying it. Thus, they have refined the science of a place. They have refined the science of place to the point where no amount of PhDs this century could ever develop the repertoire of knowledge that a single indigenous nation has about a specific place that they have developed over tens of thousands of years often. And so we would be cheating ourselves if we did not honor the indigenous peoples of wherever we were, because they're the leaders of that place. They're the ones who know very site-specific information. As we know, Mother Earth is very diverse. She has so many different biomes, you know, hundreds of thousands of different types of ecological contexts that are each unique in their own way. And so similarly, science is, the Enlightenment era of Europe has often tried to make science find the silver bullet, right? Find the theory that explains everything. Find the universal generalizable theory for everything. But what they didn't understand is that Creator made this world to be very diverse. He made this world so that there is no one theory that explains every single people in every single place. There is a multitude of theories that are customized for each place, that are true for that place. And thus multiple theories can be true at once. And so this pluralism of understanding, this pluralism of knowing place is actually part of the design of biodiversity. It's part of the design of cultural diversity. It's part of the design, hopefully, of architecture, where we are sensitive to place. We're sensitive to the unique precipitation, sunlight, its position on the Earth's axis, the ecological, ecosystemic things going on around us. All of that, our design should be sensitive to place. Now, this is not how America always operates, right? Like, we want to have the same type of skyscraper in every city across the country. Or this is the difference between a endemic species, one that you can only find in one place in the world, you know, like the blue cheek butterfly fish you can only find in the Red Sea. The Catalina Island goats, you know, you can only find them, or the San Clemente goats, rather, you can only find them on San Clemente Island off of California. Same with the Catalina mahogany, you know, you only find this tree in Catalina. So there are many things that are meant to be of place. This contrasts with cosmopolitan species, which are species you find all over the world, like pigeons or killer whales are found in every ocean. And nothing wrong with cosmopolitan species. They have their place, but we must also honor that one size does not always fit all, especially when it comes to architecture, especially when it comes to design. And we'll get into why that is. So I'll just introduce myself in the traditional manner. My name is Lyla June. Lyla June, Yeneshie. Nanisht Eje Trachitni Nishla. I come from the Nanisht Eje Trachitni clan of the Diné Nation. We are also incorrectly known as Navajo. We are indigenous to what is now called New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona, but we call this Dinétra, Diné-Bakea, the people's land. We also share this homeland with our beautiful Pueblo relatives, Kara-speaking, Tiwa-speaking, Zuni, Hopi-speaking relatives, and this is their land too. And so that's my first clan. We get our clans from our mothers. And like in America, you get your last name from your father. In our world, you get your last name from your mother. So my second clan, which is my father's clan, which he got from his mother, is the Tsétsêhéstâhese. And the Tsétsêhéstâhese is the Cheyenne word for Cheyenne. His mother was from Anadarko, Oklahoma, a Southern Cheyenne woman. Aro Ashihe. My mother's father is of the Salt clan of the Diné. Aro Bilagana E Dashanale. My father's father is of the European clans. And there's some Scottish in there, Scandinavian, British, different things that I might not know about either as well. In that manner, I present myself as a Diné woman. So yeah, I just wanted to do that to honor my ancestors before we kick off. I'm going to go ahead and share a little slideshow. Hopefully that's okay. I know sometimes slideshows can be not so fun, but I'm going to make sure there are many, many pictures so we can all, like a picture book. I like pictures. So let's just get into it. So this talk is actually about Indigenous food systems, and I call it Architects of Abundance, Indigenous Food Systems and the Excavation of Hidden History. This is my dissertation topic. I'm in my 4th year of the doctoral journey. I'm almost done. And this is actually a talk I've never done. I've never talked about Indigenous food systems and how they could apply to architecture and design in general. But Diamond, thought that this would be a good idea, and I agree, because what I'm finding with not just food systems, but any system, is that the outward appearance is only as good as the invisible ethics, values, and principles that drive that outward manifestation. So it's kind of like a tree. You see the tree growing out, but the roots you can't see. And yet the roots are what feed and give life to the whole system. So the invisible world of ethics, values, principles, goals, I'm realizing through teachings from my elders and just doing this research that those invisible things that are in the world of our human consciousness are actually so powerful, and they drive all of our creations. And so in the Diné world, we call this Tsétsêhéstâhese, which means sacred thinking. And so Tsétsêhéstâhese is the birthplace of all creation. And then it goes to Nahat'ah, which is the planning phase, Aro'ina, which is the implementation phase, and then Sihasin, which is the reflection, evaluation, processing, enjoying phase. So, but it all starts with the thoughts, So I'm going to talk about these food systems, and I'm going to talk about their underlying principles, the ways, the things that drove these people to do the things they did. And I think that will apply to architecture, because every building has deeper principles embedded within it. So this picture is a picture of Florida. It's an artist's rendition based on the vast shell middens that we find in the river systems of Florida. These are oyster shells. So all those piles of stuff, that's oysters. This is a real rendition of real middens that we find in Florida. These people were like booming. And the oysters, we know, are a really important part of a lot of estuarine indigenous communities. Oysters, they filter the water, and they are sometimes, at least in the Chesapeake Bay, for example, present day Washington, D.C., we can tell through archaeological analysis that this oyster farm is at least 6,000 years old, that the Algonquin Piscataway nations were overseeing. So we know in Chumash territory in the Channel Islands near Malibu, Santa Barbara, California, that they were harvesting shellfish consistently without end for at least 11,000 years from the Channel Islands. Channel Island ecosystem. So that's why I call it architects of abundance, because they were abundant and they just kept on going. And this abundance was not an accident, it was by design. So, so let's get into a few case. I think I'm going to do 4 case studies of different examples of indigenous food systems that flourished on this land before Columbus was ever born. And one of them is still going. Sadly, a lot of them have been almost completely obliterated, such as the Channel Island one. The black abalone has collapsed. The sea otters have nearly collapsed. The kelp forests have nearly collapsed. So, but some of them are still going. So I'm going to go to 4 case studies of indigenous food systems. Then we're going to talk about how does this apply to architecture or anything really. I know we all do different things on this call. And so hopefully it can apply to anything. Okay, so let us begin. So the first one I want to talk about is the Ashiwi or the Zuni runoff agriculture. And this is a study done, there's actually quite a few studies done on this really fascinating strategy, I might call it, of agriculture. So let me explain these diagrams for you. So this is what the Zuni people would do. And they would actually position, and they still do, is they position their fields at the base of small watersheds. So instead of piping water to their fields, they just put their fields where the water is. And in this manner, they honor creation. They honor what's already going on. They honor what Creator has put in place. They don't try to change it or pipe it or ship it or import it or export it. They honor the locality of a system. So by positioning their fields at the base of small watersheds, this is in the desert, right? So these are New Mexico. This is a New Mexico nation. And if you've ever been to New Mexico, it is a dry place. That's where I'm sitting right now. I love it. Some people don't love it. I love it. But in the summer, we get these monsoons, we get these rains, and every monsoon, this watershed will bring in a ephemeral stream, meaning just a stream that pops up and then it goes away. It just comes and then it leaves. So these ephemeral streams not only bring water into the fields of these people, they also bring nutrients, because these upland soils are really rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, other things that plants need to grow healthy and strong. So every single monsoon, their fields get an injection of not just water, but nutrients, such that these people, there's one field that we've studied, when I say we, I mean the larger scientific community, not myself, that they've studied that has been continuously planted for 1,000 years at least that we know of, without ever importing outside irrigation or outside fertilizer. So if you're a farmer, you know how incredible that is, to continuously plant a single plot for 1,000 years is a big deal, because normally you have to leave it fallow for at least 5 years so that the nutrients can build back up. But because they situate these fields in places that receive a constant influx of nutrients, they can just keep going and going and going. So that's why I call it architects of abundance, because it's very much by design. So here's a little video, right, of the upland slopes that actually have all the nutrients, and it says weather. So the weather will come and rain into these crops and bring the soil and the water. So here's a couple more diagrams. So this ephemeral streams will come through. And what's really cool is you can actually adapt these, how much water comes in with these little sort of makeshift dams. They don't take a lot of energy to make, and you can even pack them with more sagebrush or less so that they contain more or less water. So you can actually regulate the flow pretty easily. So this is dryland farming. This is corn, growing really healthy and strong in New Mexico. So that's one example. It's about 15 to 300 years old, 3,000 years old. It's a bioregional landscape scale. It's anthropogenic, it's organic, non-synthetic, using locally available materials, high biodiversity, because you're working with the upland slopes that have these big forests and your corn. And yes, it domesticates some species. So I want to talk a little bit about the ethics and the principles of this is, like I said, you're positioning your field where Creator has provided the water. So in a Diné cosmology, we call ourselves Diné, Nahokadian Diné, which means earth, surface, sacred people. So we honor that Creator put us on the earth's surface. So traditionally, it is actually taboo to suck water out of underground aquifers. We actually trust that everything we need is right here on the earth's surface. And so this connects to locally available materials. If it's not locally available, you don't need it. That's oftentimes the cosmology and the ethic behind Indigenous designs. And I think that applies to architecture quite a bit, because if your architecture only uses locally available things, then you have everything you need right there. And I think around the world, people have proven that they can build what they need just using what's around them. So that's one of the sort of principles, is this local stuff. So I'm going to go to Bolivia. This is another computer rendition of a very ancient system in Baure, Bolivia, in the Amazon. And so what happens is a floodplain aquaculture. So this is a floodplain management. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, but on this left image, you see these little funnels here. The fruit trees and the funnels are funneling. When it floods, this whole area will flood, and then the water will flow through this funnel, and they can close or open this funnel. So they had this amazing, incredible floodplain architecture where they would actually catch floodwaters, and with these fish weirs here this is called a fish weir, those funnels, and they would funnel them into pools or reservoirs. So they would create ring ditches around their communities. They had huge causeways and canals that were good for transportation. So basically, after the flood came, they could actually retain that water year round. And with those floods would always come a bunch of fish, a bunch of different edible aquatic species. So the flood, the rainy season would bring all this water and food into their system. And they designed it such that they could catch that life force, so that during the dry season, they would still have access to different food species. So what's really cool too, so I believe it was 14 kilometers worth of causeways they measured. So this is an aerial view of just how massive and granted, this is a 500-year-old, it was abandoned 500 years ago when the Spanish missionaries came and wiped everyone out. Not everyone, there's still a lot of Baure left, but 98% of the people were wiped out. So this is a sort of an older system that's a little hard to see now, but this is some aerial views giving you an image of just how massive that these earthworks were. So they would gather the earth together to create walls or causeways that would funnel the water where they wanted it. Let's see what else. So this is the area that they manage. This is a massive, massive area. This is the whole state of Bolivia, and this is Llano de Mojos. So this is the massive area that they were able to manage. So it's just incredible. And I'm sure they weren't the only tribe who did this. I'm sure this was going on throughout the Amazon, where you really harness, maybe that's the wrong word, but you harness the life and the force of the rains, similar to the Zuni. So that's a really cool system that I really liked to learn about. I think if you want to look at the principles, one of the principles strategies maybe was this idea of multi-purpose. So as you can see, this canal is for transportation. This canal is also feeding these fruit trees. So they would plant fruit trees along the causeways. So this system, the very structure of it was very multi-purpose. It also caught the fish. So you're having a system that catches fish, creates a fruit orchard, and provides the community with transportation all in one system. And I'm probably not even naming all of the different things that this system provided. I do know that there was also snails, like I forget the number, like tons of snails, not just saying tons, but literally tons of snails, edible, like escargot. You know, we love escargot, it's a delicacy. So these guys had this delicacy all the time. So this was a helpful support system for snails. Also these fruit trees, I'm forgetting the name of the fruit tree, but they attract game animals. So there's certain animals that they could hunt that love this fruit. So they would kind of attract and create habitat for the game animals. So you'd have fish, protein, fruit, all in one system, transportation, to some extent, I think protection from enemies if you had your, like, you know, your canal way around the settlement. And so I think that's one of the cool things about this system. The design is very multi-purpose, and you find that throughout Indigenous designs. It accomplishes many things at once. This is similar to passive design, right? You have a roof that puts a roof over your head, but it also creates that shade structure that can keep your house cool in the summer months and warm in the winter months. So similar concept to passive solar. It's doing many things at once. I'm going to go now to American Grasslands Pyro management. Some people call it pyric herbivory because they put the fire in and then it produces grasslands that then the game animals like deer, elk, buffalo, antelope, sheep come and eat. So I'm just going to read this quote. The Illinois Confederacy shaped and altered much of this region as an anthropogenic creation. Like many other indigenous groups in North America, their most important tool was fire. Burning the prairies, they made the grasses hospitable for grazers and managed prairie as a game reserve to maximize productivity. So a lot of people are scared of fire. I don't blame them. This is obviously artist rendition. Sadly, we can only kind of imagine anymore because, like I said, about 98% of us were wiped out. But I do like this picture. So basically, people are scared of fire, but there was a time when this whole continent was actually completely shaped by fire. And they're not big Bambi fires. They're not the big, scary, Smokey the Bear stuff. It's cool burns that, because they burned every year, there wasn't much fuel load to catch fire. So even this rendition actually is a little inaccurate because there wouldn't be this many trees. The trees would be probably more spaced apart. One elder that I talked to in Santa Cruz, California, said there's about 13 trees per acre was their general rule of thumb. So you have very spaced out old growth trees, and in between you'll be burning. And because the trees are spaced out, you're never going to have a huge forest fire. He said, the same elder said, now I look out on my land, Lyla, there's 200, 300, 400 trees per acre because the Americans don't know how to manage lands. And what you have is a lot of sick trees because all these trees are competing for limited nutrients, water, and sunlight. So if you have 400 trees on an acre, they're actually, we think of like, oh, it's so beautiful nature, but it's actually not very natural because these woods needed us to be there, to tend to them like a garden, to thin them out, just like you would thin a row of carrots that you plant. You don't want to have too many carrots bunched up because then they will choke each other out. So when you space the trees apart, they have room to grow. They have room to flourish. They don't have to grow real tall and skinny to fight for the canopy, which is what you'll see in a lot of forests, is tall, skinny trees trying to get some sunlight, but you'll actually let these trees do what they're designed to do, which is kind of billow out. Like an oak tree likes to go like this. You know, a lot of trees like to go like that. And so by spacing them out, you let these trees have enough nutrients for themselves, enough sunlight, and enough water. So you could either have a lot of really sick trees, or you could have a few really healthy, robust trees. Oftentimes these were edible trees, right? Like oak that had a really good oak nut harvest or acorn harvest, or they were chestnut. You know, there's chestnut throughout the Eastern United States, or they used to be. Shagbark hickory, black walnut, indigenous persimmons, pawpaws. I mean, we had so many cool fruit and mass trees that were really strong providers, pecans, you know, providers of sustenance to the people. So you'd have your fruit and your mass trees. And then what's cool is in between, you would be burning constantly. And this burning transforms these dead plant tissues, and say in the fall, when the grasses are kind of dying, it transforms those tissues into ash. And that ash is full of bioavailable nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and it goes into the soil. And as we all know, there's that very poetic thing of how, you know, after fire comes new growth, and after ash, from the ashes is born, you know, really fertile trees. And that's not just a metaphor. It's a phenomenon that Indigenous peoples really capitalized on for millennia here throughout the whole continent, where we would inject ash into the system every year, every 2 years, maybe every 3 years. And it would bring all these nutrients back in. Another cool thing is that when you heat the earth the right amount, it actually stimulates microbial activity. You bring that charcoal into the soil. Charcoal is like a apartment building for microbial organisms. So when you bring that charcoal in, some people call it biochar, but Indigenous peoples were the original biochar people of this land, at least. Then you actually create spaces for living soil to flourish, because you have all this microbial space. The charcoal also contains moisture, or it withholds moisture in the soil. So these fires would also increase soil filtration rates, so that when it rains, it actually goes into the ground like a sponge rather than just flowing down. So there's so many cool studies that show how cool burns, you know, we're not talking about not Bambi fires, but the cool burns would actually enhance the living soil system of an area. And in the wake of these fires would be growing nutrient dense grasses. You know, after the fire is over, give it a month or two, you'll have these nutrient dense grasses starting to pop up. And who loves nutrient dense grasses but deer, elk, bison, antelope, et cetera, all these ungulates, all these herbivores. So what you have is your fruit and your mass trees, your fruit and your nut trees, and then between you have your protein walking around. And so this kind of brings me a little bit to just how common this was. You know, the Miamia are a nation from Illinois and Ohio. Ohio, my bad. And so the Miamia nation put out this calendar, and it shows how there's these different names for different moons. And the September moon is called the grass burning moon. So they have a lunar calendar, and a lot of tribes have lunar calendars. For my people, you know, it'll be like the baby eaglet's moon. You know, that's when all the baby eagles are born. It'll be or for the Anishinaabe people, it'll be like the ricing moon. That's the moon in the fall when the rice is ready to harvest, the wild rice. So a lot of our lunar calendars were also guides as to what to do and when, and guides as to what the ecology around us was doing. So for the Miamia, they burned so frequently, so periodically, that they had a whole moon designated, which is the September Gregorian moon, to the grass burning moon. Let's see, what do I have? Oh yeah, so they have this little quote from their book. In Sasakoyolia Kilswa, which is the grass burning moon, we see fire as something that restores and gives new life to the prairie. Fire helps clear the land of old grass and brush and open seed pods that have fallen to the ground. Because of fire, new flowers and plants emerge in the spring. So we also see this in the plains. So this is a really amazing book. If you are a pyromaniac like me, you should definitely read it. It's called Forgotten Fires, and it's a state by state. It goes like Montana, Utah, California. I mean, it just goes state by state, all of the different accounts of Native people burning the land in ways that nourished the land. So when I say architects of abundance, this is a picture of San Marcos area, Texas, and these are buffalo. So basically, way back in the day, the way that they would foster buffalo habitat is burning the prairies in a mosaic patch burning or seasonally burning. And this would prevent the shrubs and trees from invading. So these grasslands, the grasslands we think about, the Great Plains, a lot of people say, oh yeah, Native people were always following the buffalo with their little bows and arrows no, the buffalo followed our fire. We created a home for the buffalo by design, and we created an augmented buffalo habitat from thin air. And so what people don't understand is that the buffalo greatly depended on this constant, delicate, gentle, kind, human management of ecosystems to augment a home. So that's another big principle within Indigenous design, is non-human centricism. This idea that maybe, just maybe, humans are not the center of the universe. Maybe, just maybe, humans are not the supreme being of a land, and that maybe we were put here to serve other life forms. Maybe we have these big brains, not so we can dominate life, but so that we can steward life in ways that other life forms cannot. The buffalo can't make fire, right? They just got their little hooves. They need our help sometimes. And so here we are, Indigenous peoples throughout the world, we believe we have a divine assignment to care for a homeland. The Yoruba people, the word for human is chosen one, not because they're so special, but because Creator chose them to be the stewards of a certain area. We were chosen to be the servants of an area. And so if we apply this to architecture, we can think about how can my home not be human-centric? How can my home actually become a service to the world around me, or at the very least, not harm the world around me? How can we not only create homes for ourselves, but create homes for the buffalo? Because architecture, Indigenous architecture, is not just about creating a habitat for humans. It's about augmenting a habitat for other life forms. And I could give you a million examples of how we do that, but I will spare you. Let's see. So this is another one, is the Healthsuck herring roe farm. So this is a very aquatic system, as you can see. And this is in the British Columbia, right north of Vancouver. So this guy is actually clipping some herring eggs off of a hemlock bough that he had dipped into the water a few days prior. So the herring is a little silver fish that plasters everything with eggs every February. So here's the herring. They're a silverfish, and they mark the new year for Healthsuck people in February. February is their new year because the herring are so important that they actually start time cycles based on when the herring come. So to them, it's a very exciting time. This is just a basket of hemlock boughs covered in herring eggs. Same here, he's holding up hemlock boughs covered in herring eggs. So what's really cool about this system is it is also by design. So in other words, the herring actually benefit from human management of coastal ecosystems, and I'll explain how. So one of the ways that they augment herring habitat is they put these kelp, these giant fast-growing kelp, into the coastline. And even though these guys are using very modern boats, these guys have been doing this for at least 6,000 years that we know of. It's a very old system of management. So they'll dip these kelp fronds into the coastline, held up with, you know, some rope. And the kelp is a very fast growing kelp, and it will augment the surface area that the herring have to lay their eggs on. So the herring, they need this substrate, they need this surface area to lay their eggs. And so with their bare hands, humans are actually augmenting herring habitat. And they are being so good to the coastline that if the Heiltsuk people were to vanish one day, God forbid, the coast and the herring would actually miss them. They've come to need these humans. And this is an interesting idea, that humans are not pests. They don't have to be pests. They don't have to be these misfits of creation, but that humans can actually be so good to the earth that if we were to leave, she would miss us. Some people call this regenerative practice. We actually not only sustain a system, but we enhance it, we regenerate it, we give to it. And every single species has a purpose, right? That's how we feel in Indigenous cosmology. Everything has a purpose. Everything is created by the creator for a reason. So creator wouldn't just make humans on accident. You know, we have our role, we have an ecological role. And I think our architecture could be a manifestation of that purpose, that we can turn our buildings into offerings to the earth. We could turn our buildings into gifts to the earth. And I think that is what we're here to do. We can talk more about why Eurocentricism has deviated from that. I don't think it's because Eurocentricism is evil. I think it's just because they're a highly traumatized population that went into survival mode. And so instead of being a gift to the earth, we're just trying to hoard and get ready for the next war, you know? So it's not that we're bad people. We just need to shift our principles, values, assumptions, ethics, and goals of why we're here, and everything else will then fall into place and shift to follow that. Yeah, I love the Heiltsuk. So this is sort of a picture of Turtle Island. We call this North America, we call it Turtle Island, a densely populated, extensively managed continent. So this is sort of the new narrative we're trying to weave, is that this is not America, this is Turtle Island. You know, this comes from an Anishinaabe creation story and a Haudenosaunee creation story, whereby, you know, the creatress of the people landed on a turtle's back and made the earth that we're standing on now. So we like to call it Turtle Island because America comes from the word Amerigo Vespucci, who was a man that we know for a fact was commissioned to look for people to enslave and gold to extract. So we do not like to call this land after him, not because we judge him, but the ethics that drove him and the things he symbolizes of extraction, exploitation of other human beings, and colonization. We do not feel that his name should be the name, the moniker for this land. And so Turtle Island, we think, is more appropriate because it's a female-centered creation story wherein the human works in concert with the animals around her, and they help her to create this earth. So it's a story of symbiosis. It's a story of women centricity, and it's a story of regeneration and magic. And that's just so much more fun than colonization, right? So why do we call it Turtle Island? And so the other part of this narrative we're trying to reweave is that this is a densely populated area. You know, when colonizers came here, they very intentionally mislabeled it as terra nullius, no man's land. There's nobody here, you know. And that was partly because they were trying to justify the theft of this land, right? So if there's nobody here, we're not stealing it from anyone. And secondly, a lot of these populations were decimated before history was ever written. So the Norse, for example, actually had wiped out huge native populations hundreds of years before Columbus ever got here with their diseases. So yes, the Pilgrims came to a vacant civilization, an empty land, but it wasn't empty because there was never people there. It was empty because they had already been extirpated. So really restating, like, this is a densely populated land prior to Columbus's arrival, prior to the Norse arrival. This was not just an empty land. Secondly, it's extensively managed. You know, a lot of people view Indigenous peoples as nomads, eating hand to mouth, scattered bands of, you know, sparsely populated people around a fire trying to find a berry that they can eat or a deer they can hunt. No, get that out of your mind if your teachers ever told you that, because these were actually huge civilizations managing the land by design to augment the life and abundance of the land. And it's so exciting because it means that if we did that before, we can do it again. And what's also really important to notice is that it's not enough to just mimic what Indigenous peoples did here. We must also restore leadership of Indigenous peoples to key homelands. Otherwise, we're just appropriating knowledge all over again. We're just appropriating culture. We need to actually not just heal the soil, we need to heal history. So regenerative agriculture will never be truly regenerative until it regenerates the broken hearts of the people who were dispossessed of their lands, of their entire worlds, of their people, very brutally and violently. So that's my little policy recommendation there, is that we not just mimic Indigenous peoples, but that we restore leadership to Indigenous peoples over their lands. So we're coming up on an hour. I know that I need to stop talking. We're going to do questions. I just wanted to do two quick things. So how do we apply this to design? So healing history is one way. You know, this is a Native American longhouse at Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon. So they created this longhouse on campus to honor the Indigenous culture, to create a space that was, you know, connected to what the old architecture used to be, which was these longhouses. And to give students a place where they felt at home, where they felt safe. So one way we can apply these ideas to design is by healing history. You know, our structures can in and of themselves embody paying homage to the people whose lands we're standing on. So that's exciting. You know, even little things like that. I know we need to do much more, but even little things like that can be so healing, so exciting. So another way we could do this is healing. So honoring local nations with context-specific architecture, right? Like you wouldn't do a teepee here in Oregon because they didn't have teepees, right? So you want to be sensitive to context. Decenter Europe, you know, I think we have enough Europe stuff here. we're good on that, you know. Consider how space makes space for identity to flourish. So the next way I think we could apply this to design is healing ecology. So this is a hogan, you know, this is my people's architecture. As you can see, this is a little sweat house. So that's not really a home, that's more of like a ceremonial spot. But so this is actually quite big inside because it's built into the earth. And it's made of all local materials, right? You have the plaster, which is just from the mud around you, and the straw and the bark of the pinon juniper trees can kind of fortify it. And then you have this lumber that is locally sourced. So the inside is this is the roof. So we designed a kind of roofing, or actually architecture in general, that required no nails, no glue. It's just all gravity-based architecture. So this kind of has this other ethic embedded in it, which is that we really only need what is around us. We can create things that are truly freestanding, meaning they're made of local materials. We don't have to import nails from wherever, and we can actually create things from the ground up, from where we are. So I think that's how we heal ecology, is we can reduce the carbon footprint of our homes by using locally sourced things and really trusting that we can do it with what we have around us. So there's a lot more I could say. I will spare you. Here's a few takeaways, habitat expansion, reciprocity, holistic management, landscape scale design, millennial scale, meaning these things were thousands of years old, consent and free will based. We didn't cage the buffalo. We just made a home and they, by their own free will, came to us, very different paradigm of caging your food versus building a home for your food to come to you. And in that sense, you feed your food. Stewardship mentality. So I think all this kind of stuff could be applied to architecture, but I really rely on all of you now because I'm not an architect in that sense. And I really think this is the part where we get to teach each other a little bit more about, what I'm talking about, because I really think each of you in this room are teachers in your own right. So we have disabled the unmute yourself because we didn't want to get Zoom bombed, although now you can unmute yourself. But if you want to raise your hand, or maybe Dov, you could take it from here and facilitate, because I don't know exactly what you had in mind.
Yeah, so thank you so much, by the way. That was so wonderful. That was an incredible lecture. I'm sure everybody here agrees. Great turn as well. And so for the Q&A, if you'd like, you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you can't unmute yourself or don't feel comfortable, you can put the question in the chat and we'll read it out loud. So either way.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. This is a really important lecture, I think, for us to have, especially since I think it comes up occasionally that we see Indigenous architecture, maybe not Indigenous architecture, but Indigenous structure. And I think it's really important that we see it. So thank you for coming. One of the questions that I have, being I'm in third year, and we're currently doing a housing studio. And I think one of the things that's kind of hard to at least justify in my mind when imagining building a building in a site like New York City or just any urban area is like how using local materials happens in a city, because as much as it's something that is important to me is like a forest and the earth, but it feels kind of disconnected when you kind of have to imagine designing something in a city. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how sourcing local materials might be used in a larger scale, or maybe the scale is the problem in itself, but in a more urban setting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think all this is just my opinion, for the record. I don't really claim to know the answer to anything really. But that in general, New York City is not sustainable, like inherently. I don't know if we're meant to have that much population density. Precisely for the reasons I stated in this, this talk, is that we are meant to be sensitive to the world around us. We're meant to honor life around us, and to completely pave over everything and make it completely human-centric is not the right design. There's that. Having said that, upstate New York has a really forested area, and I think one of the misconceptions about forestry is that it's bad to cut a tree. Interestingly, I think that we actually must thin forests. However, of course, clear cutting is not the only way to thin a forest. But to the point of what we were saying before is you actually need to thin the forest just like you would weed a garden. You need things to be clean so that you don't have 400 trees on an acre sucking all the nutrients and water out of the soil, which, by the way, becomes a tinderbox, right? Because you have all of these thirsty trees, dried out trees, drying out the soil, and closely spaced together. You know, a lot of the forest fires we're seeing in California, yes, they are related to climate change, but they're also related to the prohibition of indigenous forestry, prohibition of indigenous fire, because these didn't used to be these tinderboxes like that. The trees were more hydrated, more healthy, because they weren't so densely crunched into one little area. So I'm just going to share my screen briefly. I want to show you all a really wonderful, you know, I don't know what you would call it, I don't know, tribal enterprise. So Menominee Tribal Enterprises is an award-winning forestry program where they actually see this little square here. I don't know if you could see it, but like there's a little, you know, it's going away when I zoom in, but this is their reservation. It's this little like rectangle thing. So they used to be on the coast here by the lakes, and they got dispossessed of their land and relocated to this little reservation. And it was supposedly the worst land. You know, they just put the Indians on the worst land. We're like, okay, we're going to make the best of this. And they did. So they have been harvesting lumber from here for over 100 years. And they have actually augmented the biomass of the forest. So what they do is they chop the reservation into many sub-parcels. And then each sub-parcel gets harvested every 5 years. So this parcel will be 5 years into regrowth, and then they harvest. This parcel is 2 years into regrowth. They don't touch it. They let it kind of regrow. And the forest is actually self-regenerating. So they actually leave the old growth and they harvest the younger trees, which actually is needed. So they have harvested from this forest, this little space that the government gave them for over 100 years. And they have actually increased the biomass of this forest. Don't know how exactly those numbers work, but they've created a tribal enterprise where they make money from lumber, but they also have increased the health of the forest. So I think, you know, you all as architects, now that I think about it, are always inevitably going to be connected to forests, I think. And so that's really exciting, you know, that you can source your lumber from Menominee tribal enterprises, or you can support tribes in creating similar forestry enterprises that are regenerative. So thank you to Anna Latanzio. Yeah. Oh, cool. I will check that out. I love oysters. So anyways, I hope that answers your question a little bit. I know it's not a full answer. And if anyone else wants to share an answer to that question, please feel free. Yes, Mr. Cheney, do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess it's more of like a comment and an example. Totally.
Yes, please. Comments are so welcome.
So first, thank you for the talk and all of what you said. It's so resonates with me for sure, in many different ways. And it makes me think of all of the things that you're mentioning, the way that like people are engaging with the land, and then the way that the architecture is influenced by the land. It reminds me of the Potawat Health Village, which is right here where I live in Northern California, in Arcata, California. And it's an Indian health service that's completely designed and modeled after the traditional plank houses of this region. And not only that, on the architectural sense of like how it looks, but also it's like they have a huge garden and like they're constantly, you know, engaging in these different you know, traditional practices of this region and health and such. And it's just like, I guess, an anecdotal thing of like, I've been to all kinds of Indian health services and this one in particular, it really just exudes, you know, that like beautiful feeling when architecture aligns with exactly what you just said, you know, the way that the food system is influenced by that. So I wanted to like uplift that example for those who might be relevant for. And also there's this book that I love. It's called New Architecture on Indigenous Lands. And it goes through different regions, different buildings that have been created by Indigenous architects, with architects, all of those things that are kind of like influencing those things. And I just thought, yeah, it might be worth mentioning in the circle, and also just love the talk. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Appreciate that so much. Yeah, that's why I like to not be the only teacher in the room, because I know I only have a sliver of what there is to teach here. So if anyone else has any things like that they want to share, please feel free to share. So yeah, would anyone have a comment or question?
There's another question in the chat. I mean, we can wait a second for people if they have any comments, but if not, Sarah sent a question in the chat. If you want, you can read it.
Yeah. So it's, can you please speak to how to honor the people's land I stand, live, work on Onondaga, Haudenosaunee land in upstate New York? Yes, I get asked this question a lot. And it's a really great question and an important question. And I don't claim to have the answer, but the one that I've given. Did you want to add to that question, Sarah, before I jump into it?
You're muted.
Okay, maybe I'm trying to ask you to unmute. I don't know if it's helping. Okay, I'm gonna answer, and maybe by the time I'm done, we'll find out how to unmute you. So basically, one of the things that I share with people is this magical question, which is, how can I help, if at all? So when you ask a local Indigenous people this question, you are positioning them at the steering wheel of how you help. And you are also not assuming that they want your help. So it's like you're saying, how may I help, if at all? So the answer to this question, again, is not one size fits all. Every different nation has different needs, and even different people within nations have different ideas of how you would help. So the first step really is to ask, how can I help, if at all? And so they might say, you know, well, we're trying to do this fundraiser for this thing to protect this creek, or we're trying to get diapers for the women because they can't afford diapers for their children. Or they might say, you know, there's different ways, you know, of course you have to be careful as a woman, you know, to not go, we don't go alone anywhere as women. So, you know, go with friends and say, how can I help, if at all? And so there's things like that you can do. And the mistake that's often made is this assumption that we know what tribes need, right? So we go in with, I got a permaculture class and you're going to love it, you know, and it's like, maybe not, you know, maybe that's not what they want or need right now. Or I have this kids media thing that your kids are going to love, you know, and that might be true. But recently this woman came to the Navajo Nation Library. She said, I'm going to create a mobile library for you. And we were like, whoa, hold your ponies there. what, you didn't even ask us if we wanted to do that with you, but would be even better is if you said, how can I help, if at all? Because the people on the ground are going to know so much more intimately what their community needs than any of us will know. So that's the magic question that I always suggest, is how can I help, if at all? And I don't know if you found out how to unmute, but feel free if you did. Okay. Okay, so any other questions or comments, feel free. Yes, Nachi, I don't know if I said your name correctly.
Yes, it's Naki. So I am a permaculture designer in Central Kentucky. Thank you for this discussion. Some of your comments, you're talking about Eurocentrism and the ideas coming out of the scientific revolution that a single answer could be applied anywhere in the world, really brought to mind the international style and modernism in the early 20th century, which was exactly that, and kind of in terms of the form of architecture. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts about if there might be something to that effect, something that could be applied across the world, but maybe a truly internationalist style, taking local contexts into account, but at the same time kind of integrating this idea of a common experience, generalizing the experience of humanity. And because that seems to be something that is very necessary in the kind of healing that we're being called to participate in this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you be open to stating your question just one more time? I just want to make sure I got it.
Yeah, so if part of the problem that we can identify is that some people in the past have tried to impose one-size-fits-all solutions, is there maybe even just ethics, and you've touched on this in terms of place-sensitive, building with indigenous materials and things like that, but an ecologically appropriate ethic that we could share internationally and use that as a way to communicate and really, again, generalize the experience across all peoples who are trying to do good work in this time. And it doesn't have to be about architecture necessarily.
Yeah. So like to generalize in a good way, basically, rather than to generalize in a harmful or colonial way. But yeah, I think the ethic is, I said it at the beginning, and I still kind of think it's true, is like to center the indigenous peoples of where you live. And this is really exciting because it's kind of starting to happen, and it's starting to happen throughout the country. Not fast enough, but still to remember where you're standing, to remember the history of the land. And that's why this dissertation to me is important, because if, like Kentucky, for example, they have this dark and bloody ground theory, which is the bloody, I forget how you say it, maybe you can correct me, but the theory is that the whole state of Kentucky had no native people there, that they only would come there to hunt. And I just find it so fascinating that Kentuckians have said, like, everywhere except for where this random border is, there was no natives. But of course, we know that's not true. We have fossilized pollen evidence that shows that Shawnee people oversaw chestnut groves for over 3,000 years in Kentucky. But it's a very convenient theory for settlers, right? Because it's like, oh, nobody here, guess we didn't steal any land from anyone. It's very convenient. Or, oh, nobody here, guess we are the first people of this land. And so it's very funny how that is. And I think that hunting theory is being turned on its head right now, and we're really being beckoned to learn the history of the soil we're standing on. And I think if anything should be generalized, it's that nothing should be generalized. Kind of like the only constant is change, similar, like the only thing you can generalize is that nothing can be generalized. In other words, there is so much uniqueness to each and every place. And they find that linguistic diversity tends to match places of high biodiversity. So it's very interesting how when there's many different types of biomes, different types of ecological settings, you have human beings expressing that diversity through their cultures, through their languages. And one of my elders said, Diné Bezad, our language, is the sound of the earth speaking through us. It's the sound of the desert speaking through humanity. And Caris, the language of the Pueblos here in the Rio Grande, is the sound of the river speaking through humanity. So I think that's the only ethic we might be able to share. So how are we doing on time, Dov? I don't remember when we were supposed to end.
Well, we have time for one more question. And yeah, just to answer quickly, the question in the chat is there'll be access to recording. We post all the student lecture series on YouTube and Vimeo. And you can find that link to that on our Instagram, or if you just search student lecture series Cooper Union online. And if there's any more questions, we have time for one more.
Hi, sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand, but I have a question. So I was wondering, just to explain a little bit, I live in the Hudson Valley of New York. These are the Mohican lands and also Lenape. And I have been in relationship with native nut trees for a number of years. And it's been a really beautiful process for me to learn more about Indigenous land use, and especially with these tree kin that I have. And my question is, if you're a forager or a forester or an architect who has developed a relationship with a plant or tree that has deep Indigenous history, when speaking about Indigenous use or trying to make further connection possibly with Indigenous people, with these beings, what are respectful and right ways of interaction through that connection of this plant or tree being with the history, or hopefully someday with Indigenous people themselves?
That's a great question. I mean, I can accidentally be very, very Indigenous centric, which I think, of course, is needed in the world, but it still doesn't answer the question of like, how do we belong in a place as non-Indigenous peoples? How do we integrate? And I am half European almost, so I definitely know the experience of being non-Indigenous. Even, I mean, I don't know it very well, but because I also have experience of being Indigenous, but I know how it feels to have your ancestors haven't come here. And I think that this is something I just heard yesterday, and it's this idea of how to indigenate. And apparently, it's a secondhand information, but in Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, which is like been #1 bestseller for like months now, braiding sweetgrass, she talks about how an invasive species can come to be supportive of the local ecology. So apparently there are examples of that happening, and it's just kind of a pretty metaphor for how, you know, we can come to the land not necessarily being of the land, but still integrate ourselves in a way that is resonant and harmonious with the pre-existing ecosystem. And I do think that is very possible. And I do think that there is this, of course, we want to be careful, because I think a lot of people are hesitant to even use the word indigenate, because we want to honor the fact that we are settlers and not hide from that, or not try to deny, like to embrace that and to own that, and through that owning we can become more kind to the land by owning, you know, who we are, where we're from. But I think that there is this notion of adoption, you know, this notion of I know some of my Indigenous counterparts, my contemporaries, would be upset if I said this in the wrong way, but you know, I think there is a way to adopt, a way to embrace even our enemies, you know, who are seemingly our enemies, but are not actually our enemies anymore, because they have beautiful intentions, and to re-establish that kinship. So I think you creating and cultivating these relationships with these local trees is really beautiful. And it's exactly what we would want, right? That's what Native peoples have always asked, is like, hey, come here, you know, we always came to the shores with open arms. We were always hospitable. We were always giving foods to whoever came. Hospitality is one of the core tenets of Indigenous culture. You always feed your guests. And so I don't think that Native peoples were ever just like, nobody come here. In fact, we had embraced visitors long before Columbus. Everyone and their mom came here before Columbus. So we had always been about embracing guests. I think that we can do that again. And this time our guests are not coming with swords and guns and what have you. They're coming with an open heart and an earnest desire to heal history and to heal the past, and to be a part of the solution. And I think that's how, if ever we could indigenate, I think that's how we would do it. Secondly and lastly, you know, I want to put this essay in the chat. This essay is my journey of finding my own Indigenous European roots. I think we as Europeans, we really need to do this, because we have been severed from our umbilical cord. We've been severed from our homelands. And this has really deep spiritual, physical, emotional, psychological effects on us. And it's back in the day at the Ford factory of the Ford motor vehicles, he would have all the European immigrants who came to work for him go into this melting pot, a big, huge, you know, 2-story tall cauldron, and go in wearing their traditional clothing, whether they were Hungarian or Polish or Latvian or what have you. And then he would have them come out wearing a black suit, a top hat, a black tie, and holding an American flag. So assimilation has not just happened to Indigenous peoples, it's happened to us as European peoples. We have had our indigeneity systematically erased from us. And I think that connecting with our Indigenous roots is really important, a really important part of being allies of Indigenous peoples here, because then we're not seeking to get something from indigeneity from Indigenous people. We're honoring, we come from a place, we come from a homeland that had its own architecture, its own language, and it wasn't English, you know, it was more likely something else. And so I think part of our duty to Indigenous peoples is to explore our own indigeneity and to remember where we come from and who we are. So I hope that answers. Thank you all for letting me letting me blab at you for so long. It's a joy to be with you. I really pray that all of your work is guided by the ancestors and by Creator, and that we can help, even at least one person in what we do in this life. So thank you, all of you, very, very much. And I pray that this was helpful in some way.
Thank you so much. It was really an honor to have you. And thank you everybody for showing up. Have a good night.
Thanks everyone. Bye.